Okay, then I think we can slowly start with, in my humble opinion, the most interesting panel of the day, the panel about the climate crisis. Before I introduce our amazing panel and our amazing panelists, I would like to just get a feeling from the audience with everything going on. We've heard so much in the first panel already about the current crises the world is facing. For which of you in the audience is the climate crisis a top 3 issue? Please raise your hands. A top 2 issue? And the most important issue? That is as expected, but still interesting. Now, I would like to just briefly introduce you to our panelists. To my left, we have Professor Helga Kromp-Kolb from the University of Natural and Life Sciences in Vienna. She's one of the premier meteorologists in Austria and has been working on communicating the climate crisis to the broad audience, to a wide audience for over 30 years, which gives her a lot of experience. Right next to her, we have Ralf Roman from Wien Energie. He works in the renewable energy sector, one of the most crucial sectors if we are to beat the climate crisis in any way. And he's also a graduate from the Vienna University of Natural and Life Sciences. Right next to him, we have Clemens Rosenmeier from the Federal Economic Chamber of Austria. He works on mostly on Brussels-related issues to the climate. Interestingly, Mr. Rosenmeier is a graduate of the Diplomatic Academy, and he is actually a graduate of the same program that I am currently studying, which is also quite interesting for me. It's nice to have you all here. And last but not least, to my very, very left there, we have Professor Steurer, who is also from the Vienna University of Natural and Life Sciences, but works there as a political scientist and is connecting sort of the politics of the environment, of the climate crisis with each other. Now, so sort of as a kickoff question, you all have a very, extensive background in sort of fighting the climate crises in your own way, be that through science, be that in the energy sector, be that in sort of on the policy level itself. Why would you, and I know you've probably said this 100 times by now, why is it still so important for you personally and also maybe also professionally to give sort of your life to the fight against the climate crisis? And I would ask to start with you, Professor Kromp-Kolb.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation, for having me here. In introducing us, you shortened the name of our university, which is fine, but what you cut out were the resources. And that's exactly what we're talking about. We're talking about resources, natural resources, and natural resources are the basis of our life. And if we diminish or, interfere with our resources above a certain extent, to a certain level, then that endangers our life as a civilization, as individuals. And that's why I think it is so absolutely important. The second part is these multiple crises we're in, including the resources and the climate crisis, they are also an enormous chance to change things. And it sort of was a little bit addressed in the morning, but not to the extent I think necessary. I think we really can use these crises, also the crisis, political crisis, whatever, we can use them as an opportunity for change, because change is much more difficult if everything is running smoothly and if there are no problems. Nobody sees necessity for change. But at the moment, everybody sees necessities for change, and we could use that to move towards a better, a fairer, a more equitable, and a more sustainable world.
Yes, thank you also for the invitation today. I work in the energy sector for the Wiener Stadtwerke, especially in the renewable production side, and I work for delivering clean energy produced by sun, wind, and water, and that's one tool for solving this climate crisis. And for me, it's also the top problem what we are facing now is the climate crisis. And I'm glad that I can deliver one tool of many to reduce the problem or to solve one time the problem. Every local energy project supports energy independence and also economic resilience, and these are, in my opinion, keys for solving problems at the local level.
Going towards Brussels in your capacity as a representative for the Federal Chamber of Commerce, why are you effectively, in your own way, fighting against the climate crisis?
Yes, great, thanks. So thank you very much for the invite. Indeed, I work for WKÖ, Wirtschaftskammer Österreich, in our Brussels office. I'm there for representing manufacturing industry, Austrian manufacturing industry. I also like to say thank you very much for the invite as an ETH alumni. Also, it's 9th of May, so in Brussels, everything is closed except for the institutions because we're celebrating Europe Day. I think that in itself, you made the survey, and now in the last 2-3 years, the topic of defense and security and also migration have been steadily growing, but the climate environment has steadily been there in the top 3 or top 5 in the last, I don't know how many decades, 20 years probably. So that's one thing. Also, maybe for a significant part of the population worldwide, the new Pope is also a symbol of hope. I guess I'd also like to mention that there's those two things. Just before, what I actually want to say is, I think you mentioned resources, and also I always came in, also I studied ETH, also from my family background, from this more entrepreneurial angle. So obviously without a functioning climate, without a functioning planet, there is no economy, there is no wealth creation for people, obviously. We can all agree on that. At the same time, we need to give them the framework, the companies, to do what they're best at, to innovate and to create wealth. So that's the angle where I'm coming from and trying to tackle the issue. And I think, yeah, as an introduction, I think I'll leave it at that, and then we can delve into more details.
And you, Professor Steurer?
Yeah, why do I still work on it? Because it's the hardest problem to solve we have ever faced, I guess. Because it's so easy to push aside, because it's so easy to ignore that it's the #1 issue now and in the future, and because it's never gonna go away. I mean, every political problem ends at some point. Every pandemic ends at some point. Every war ends at some point. The climate crisis, as we handle it now, is never gonna end. It's gonna get worse and worse. If we don't change, I don't see that change anymore. So let's prepare for what's coming, and there's a lot to do, no matter how it continues.
That is actually a very good introduction. Following up on this point, also to you, you've mentioned sort of the ever-worsening state of the climate crisis. We still see emissions around the world going up, even though we've made some efforts to sort of decouple economic growth from rising emissions. And we've sort of, on an international level, on an EU level, we've started making agreements with each other, but this doesn't, you know, as sort of a more hyperbolic phrasing, this doesn't seem to do that much. So in your opinion, also from sort of the political science side, is multilateralism in climate politics still worth it?
It is, but at every level, I have to say we are failing. Let's say it as it is, we are failing, but not in terms of multilateral politics, not in terms of diplomacy, but as societies. We are not living up to the challenge, although we would still have a small window of opportunity to solve this, and we are not doing it. This is not a political question anymore. It's a societal question. The zeitgeist doesn't work towards solving the problem, it works against it. And that's where we need to work on. You can't solve it diplomatically if a majority of society doesn't want it to be solved or doesn't want to bring the sacrifices needed to solve it, whatever. The diplomacy is only the last chain in a long, the last link in a long food chain, and if you don't have the support nationally or on a continent necessary, you won't have it globally.
Mr. Rosenmeier, on that note, being on the very like policy level of it, do you get the same feeling that there's sort of waning national support, that that it's sort of not getting where it should be in sort of with regards to the climate crisis?
I think what we saw during the pandemic and then additional, let's say, crisis when it from the economic side, supply chain shortages, and this we saw. And this is my opinion now as an economist, which is my kind of original training, not necessarily the position of the chamber, but I'm saying we already got a flavor with the high inflation of what is coming to society, to the population, with more stringent climate and environment regulation at EU level that we have. And apparently it doesn't go so well with people. So that's the one thing that I can add to this as an economist, saying, okay, we just got a flavor of things will get more expensive, either because, for example, we want to increase recycling rates in Europe, which is a good thing. Probably the secondary raw materials may be, at least for a certain time, more expensive. So we have to, as a society, we have to get used to the fact.
But you know, the real inflation will be climate-driven, not policy-driven in terms of CO2
No,
pricing.
I'm just saying that was
You're
a flavor
getting there,
in a very
but we still have
term,
some
yeah.
time. Yeah.
Also specifically sort of for the energy sector, we've seen on that note what like high energy prices can do, and how sort of this dependence on also fossil fuels, on fossil energy. And there's a lot of agreements being struck both on the national level, maybe even, I'm not sure about this, maybe you can give us some insights into, are there any like sort of multilateral city level discussions about like energy? How is that sort of looking in terms of having a coherent, maybe European energy supply?
Yes, it's important to have the bigger picture, or to acknowledge the bigger picture, but it's very important also for the energy industry to be self-driven, and we can't only act because the things come from above, but we have to be also self-driven, and all the people who are working in this kind of sector, renewable sector, they are, what I can say, self-driven. Vienna Energy, for example, is one of the 5 biggest CO2 emittents in Austria, and we are 100% owned by the city of Vienna, and the goal is to be 2040 to be CO2 neutral, and also the city of Vienna wants to be CO2 neutral. And what I can say and what I see every day is the biggest budgets we have who are given free inside Vienna Energy, they are only for the renewable projects, photovoltaics, wind and water, less part is water, and also hydrogen projects. So I can only say we know problems we have to deal with it, but we are going in a way that's good, I think.
An optimistic take, which is rare on these sorts
of course,
panels.
without optimistic, you can't.
I thought about destroying the fairy tale, but I'll leave it.
Also, maybe for you, because I saw you disagreeing with some of the other panelists. Maybe if you could, you've been doing this for a long time. Maybe if you could give us some insights to what have these sort of agreements done so far. Are they enough, and where do you see sort of these challenges of multilateralism in climate?
May I, before I answer that, just make a comment to the economic view. I think one of our problems is that the creating wealth or things will become more expensive is just a very limited view of what's happening. At the moment, or for a transition period, it seems as though things become more expensive if you do environmental programs and if you add environmental criteria. But in reality, we're paying a much higher price through our change in nature. And if you look at our food, for instance, generic food, biological food, you would call it in Austria, is more expensive than conventional food. But in reality, the conventional food means that we have to denitrify our waters, that we have to do all sorts of things that cost our society. It's not on the food price, it's on the tax price. And if we don't take that into calculation, then suddenly it looks as though organic food is more expensive. In reality, all of us are paying the prices for the deterioration of our environment. And if we're talking about a free market and about honest prices, then we have to factor that in. And then suddenly the thinking changes. And I think that is what we need to make people aware of, and not just look at the price tag in the supermarket, but what does the supermarket cost us, and what does this cheap food cost us in comparison to healthy food. I'm not talking about the health system, which is also part of the system. And this is also why it's so difficult in government. You could, if the environmental ministry or the agricultural ministry imposes stronger criteria, the health ministry saves money, which makes it more difficult in political discussions. But I think we have to look at costs in a very, very different manner, in a holistic manner, and in a systems manner, and not just price tags on certain things. But your question was a different one, was about global agreements. I mean, the climate crisis is a global crisis. We cannot solve it without global agreements. But global agreements require a minimum of trust. And we cannot expect this trust to evolve and to grow if at the same time people are fighting each other on the ground, killing each other. So peace and sustainability and climate issues just go hand in hand. It's also in the agenda, in the Sustainable Development Goals. It's part of it. There's no sustainability without peace and no peace without sustainability. And I think we've lost view of that. On the other hand, the progress is not as fast as it could be in these multilateral meetings and the COPs. On the other hand, they are extremely necessary. And by the way, they also offer an opportunity for diplomacy on other topics than the climate, and this in the side meetings. So I think we have always needed, in times of crisis, opportunities for diplomats to meet where they can talk about things that cannot officially be discussed. In Austria, we have created the JASA as a meeting where scientists come together, but through this interaction of scientists, there was also an interaction between the Cold War sides. Art is such a way of getting people to meet. And these international meetings are also a possibility to talk about other things than about climate. And that is one of the reasons why I think, apart from the fact that we need these global agreements, why they are necessary, they are not enough. And I do think they need reforms. I don't think that the way they are set up, they are efficient. But I don't think scrapping them is a solution.
That is,
if I can add something, what the professor mentioned before about the costs of the conventional food, the same means also for the fossil fuels, because the price we are paying or the tax we are paying for these fuels are more or less than the problems what they are creating in the world, in the environment. So we have to be aware that these prices we are paying, they are not high enough to solve these problems they are making.
8 million deaths through aerosols by fossil fuels every year.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, again, as an economist, I agree on the externalities to be, there's a need to price in the externalities. I guess that's the economist language that the economist speaking here. But in the EU, we have a tool for that covers almost half of the emissions, which is the ETS, the emission trading system, which is a free market tool. So at some point they decided to go against a tax, but to have these tradable certificates. And I think you can see from the results, and also with a great and significant contribution from the energy sector, that the industry and the energy sector can, if there's the right incentives in place and the regulation in place, can contribute or can decarbonize. So that's one thing that I wanted to say. In terms of the multilateral treaties, I mean, on very specific topics, when we speak about specific hazardous substances, for example, or the ozone-depleting substances, we can see that it does work, the multilateral approach. I think also the COP process has its merit, because there it's really eye to eye. You get the countries from the global south, the emerging countries and the industrialized countries. One country, one vote. That's the UN. That's the UN system. So they can actually that's also a forum where they can actually talk, kind of as equals. And we see that also in the voting. I mean, if all the different island states get together, they have quite a big voting power there. So we saw that. Just for the multilateral process, I'm saying, and from the business side, just to mention that it's you have also, because you said there's also side meetings taking place. You have all these different kind of stakeholder observer organizations. For business, that's the ICC, the International Chamber of Commerce, and I think that's also important to have the different stakeholders, academia, the civil society, and also the businesses there to kind of see where the process is going.
That's actually a really interesting thing, because it sort of goes into the next question on sort of the necessity of non-state actors. We've seen sort of what crises of prices can do to the legitimacy of a government, with the turn sort of away from climate policies in voting patterns. So do you think, and maybe we'll start over there, because I think that ties in nicely to what's been said before, where does the sort of necessity of outside influence, be that scientists or academia, be that sort of civil society groups, be that industry, where can that come in, and what makes sense in terms of balancing sort of these special interests of these groups in these negotiations?
First, a bit about the COP process, because I think you said it does work. It doesn't work at all. Simply look at the indicators, at what it aimed to achieve and what it delivered. The goal was to stay below 1.5, ideally at least below 2 degrees. We are not going to stay below 2 degrees. That's almost for certain already. We have passed through the 1.5 barrier for 3 years now. In 3 years consecutively. And if you look at the CO2 concentration in the atmosphere, it was the highest jump last year that we've ever seen. So it's not working. You can look at so many other indicators and they all tell you it's not working. But as I said before, it's not just the COP process. It starts at the ground level in society. How can you expect the COP process to work when a majority of the people votes for deniers and those that are delaying the process? It's never going to work if we don't change, if we don't achieve change in society, if we don't achieve that they are voting for serious climate policies, and the majority doesn't do that yet. You can't explain the US elections and the elections in Germany and Austria in a different way than saying a majority does not want serious climate policy making. Maybe Helga can,
I see you shaking your head.
Yeah.
I don't think that's the only possible interpretation, because if you look at other polls, climate is an important factor for many, but there's other factors that are more important.
Yeah.
And I think that is the issue. And I personally would think that a lot of the explanation for these results, of these elections, is protest. It's not so much for somebody, but against politics the way they are being lived.
But you can't vote for a party like the FPÖ or the Republicans in the US and at the same time claim that climate is important to you. It doesn't go together. And the same goes for the People's Party in Austria or the CDU in Germany. It doesn't go together.
You know,
those who claim it, of course, they betray themselves. And I have a word for that. In German, it's Scheinklimaschutz, pretending to care. But when it comes to a serious question, are you for or against a speed limit of 100? A majority is against it because they are not serious about their claims.
Dennis Meadows brought a simple example. He said if you're underwater and somebody keeps you underwater and you have two buttons you can press, one is sustainability and the other is air, you're going to press air no matter how much you're for sustainability. And I think that is the problem, part of the problem we have.
Those are some interesting, very, very interesting insights. Maybe sort of from the people working in more industry-related fields. Do you sort of where do you see the role of industry, be that the energy sector, be that industry in general, maybe on an Austrian and an international level? Where do you see their sort of influence to do their part in effect? Do you believe in sort of that industry needs to sort of take a leading role even, or should that be delegated solely to the policymakers and you will adapt to the framework then? Maybe let's start with the energy sector.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the numbers and who are emitting these CO2 emissions, who are creating also the climate crisis, it's the energy sector. And of course, it's a big issue to move the energy sector in a renewable side to produce clean energy. And I have to say, of course, the view of Mr. Steurer is the right view. He's always a little bit pessimistic, I have to say.
I have to say, just look at the data and they tell you the same story. I don't know why this is called pessimism when it's realism.
Let me tell my story.
Obviously, the reality is so harsh that we tend to see it as a pessimistic story.
As I said, I think I'm on your opinion. It's the right view. I mean, I had you both as professors in my studies.
Yeah.
I come from the university with all these stories inside this energy sector, and it's what I want to say. It's not true that these bad industries are always never change. And no, they are now inside people who knows the problems and who also want to do something and
some
solve
yes,
problems.
others not.
I can also.
I hope you don't want to say that all the industry is eager for more climate protection.
Of course not, but
no.
there is
a
movement.
Absolutely, yeah.
Do you have the same view, Mr. Rosenmeier, of like industry moving in sort of a speeding direction?
You asked if industry is the driver. I can say in Austria and in Europe, also due to the regulatory framework, but they certainly are in terms of innovation.
The driver against climate policy, you mean, right?
I mean,
in Austria, the WKO is very proud of getting rid of the diesel discussion and other things. They praise themselves for blocking climate breakthroughs. That's what you mean, right?
No, that's not what I mean.
Oh,
if
really?
you look at other emitters, for example, the steel sector, the cement sector, you can look at the numbers. In the last 20 years, they reduced the cement sector, for example, is a big emitter, you know that. They reduced their emissions, I'm speaking CO2 emissions, right, because we're at the climate panel, by more than 30%. There's the numbers. I mean, that is significant. I agree, maybe, as a voter, as a citizen, maybe not fast enough, but they did something, and that's for sure.
There is a fossil fuel sector well represented in the WKO who paid out premiums for people installing gas boilers with SBECO support until a couple of years ago.
Well, but I mean, also until a couple of years ago, including all the other European governments said, for example, replace your, for the industry, I'm not speaking for the household, replace your oil fueled and coal fueled boilers for industrial processes with gas. That's at one point 30% less or 25% less CO2 emissions. So there was this incentive, so industry changed in this direction, and also...
And it was a mistake. By now we know that natural gas is as bad as coal, if you take all the leakages into account.
If you take the leakages, also the geopolitical implications,
was
of
a
course,
big mistake,
at
and
the
we are
time,
paying a price
At
now.
the time, a policy or politics said, go into gas because that's cleaner than coal and oil as a first step, and then go ahead with, for example, hydrogen.
And they created new path dependencies for the next 30 years.
That is actually a really good word, the word of path dependencies. Sort of, we're always locking into, on large infrastructural sites, we're always locking into some kind of technology. So on sort of this dilemma, because there's obviously very varying opinions on how to address sort of the climate crisis, where would you say, where can you find a balance that is at the moment the best option? Would you say maybe business as usual is sort of not enough, but is workable in sort of from a political side? Is there a need for, what are alternatives that you could maybe think of? And maybe let's start with you, Professor Kromkolb, what maybe some alternatives to the current model of how we're dealing with the climate crisis?
Well, I think one of the issues really is that, as Reinhard Steurer said, that we have not managed to gain the support of the wide public. And we need that. And we need an inclusive politics. And I think that's part of, in the sense that was given introduction, what is diplomacy? That is part of it, to really make the trigger discussions about where we're heading. And I think these need two messages. The one is the one that my colleague is giving you. We're moving towards catastrophe and at an increasing speed. But the other is that we have the option to make changes. And I think the encouraging thing is that the changes we need to make, at the same time, changes we need to make if we really continue on this path to catastrophe, to at least lessen the impacts of the catastrophe. So it's not a decision, do you want to prevent climate change or do you want to survive? It's the same answer. And therefore, I think it would be so important to really tell the story that what we need to do now is not something which will raise costs, where we have to make do without, but something where we have a lot to gain, not only in the long term, but even in the short term. I mean, if you talk to people in Vienna that have switched from fossil fuels to renewables, they are highly satisfied. They find it much more satisfying the way they heat their homes now, or where they get their electricity. People who have changed their diets feel healthier, feel better. So we have so much to gain, even in the short run, even if we don't look at climate in 10 years or 20 years. And I don't think we're telling that story. And we need to tell that story, not just say, not a simple optimism, things will turn out well. They won't. If we don't do something, they won't turn out well. And I think we need to give that message. We're on the wrong path and we're heading towards catastrophe. But we can change things. And I think this changing this narrative and solve many of the problems that get people to vote for right-wing parties, for parties that deny climate change. Many of the things that hurt them can be solved at the same time as we address climate change. But we also need industry and the whole economy for that. And at the moment, their narrative is still climate policies cost. Their narrative is not climate policies give improvements.
Taking that on from our two people from sort of more the industry side, competitiveness is a big term right now. do you think, sort of as an alternative, framing that competitiveness as sort of green competitiveness works and can engage industries more to become greener quicker? Or is that not something you both feel is a thing?
I mean, I talk about the energy sector, and without reducing consumption, there is no alternative to producing electricity and energy with renewables. That's for me, and from the enterprise I come from, clear. And in one term, Mr. Stoll is also right. We are living in a democracy, and if we are voting for parties who are not giving us ways to promote these renewable energies and to hold back renewables and to promote fossil fuels, for example, we never can change. And there is where diplomacy is coming in. Diplomacy and policy, they have to promote the renewable ideas, and because the people who are voting for these parties who then delivering also the ideas for renewables. So it's the promotion fact of the diplomacy is for me a key fact.
If I might just say yes, certainly if you speak in terms of competitiveness, we have a yearly survey or yearly analysis of the climate or environment tech sector in Austria, which is constantly growing. So in that space, if you think about climate adaptation technology, recycling technology, in everything that's water purification and things like that, Austria is quite strong in terms of the industry and also in terms of export to third countries. So that's certainly something that is big in Austria, and we should also try that it flourishes in terms of economic activity. But also what I actually wanted to mention before, since I couldn't finish my statement before, we also do an analysis. I think that's every 2 or 3 years. It's called Klimakonsum. It's with a research institute, so it's not VKU numbers or whatever. They do their calculations, and they kind of calculate the climate or the environment backpack in terms of CO2 emissions, so the climate backpack that we import. So the numbers clearly show that the European and the numbers show for the Austrian industry the reduction in CO2 emissions over the years, which has been to a certain extent compensated by imported CO2, let's say. So if you say reduction of consumption, that also goes for the consumer, obviously, because those imported are consumer goods, manufactured consumer goods. So they kind of, so what we reduce here by very stringent regulation and innovation and so on, there is an effect that we then import more. What does that mean? That some of the industrial production will be done somewhere else, which is worse even for the environment. So the Green Deal and the climate crisis also needs a functioning industry to actually provide the solutions. But if we don't have that in Europe, if we don't have that in Austria, it's going to be worse. That's what just to finish this, and to your question, I already mentioned this, the environment and green tech analysis that we do every year, and this is a growing sector that also includes other sectors. So it's not only production of a recycling plant, or just for an example, but it's also the handicraft sector that installs the things. It's also services around it. So it's not just manufacturing industries. I'm not saying it's the only solution is manufacturing industry, but if we don't keep a certain share of it in Europe that can actually innovate in these areas. Okay, I'm destroying the pen apparently, sorry, too passionate. Then I'll find it out, thanks. Then we're not going to find solutions. I mean, I think honestly there is no solution without having the economy and the industry on board as well.
Would you sort of agree or disagree? Where's your alternative?
Yeah, and there are no solutions without a functioning democracy. Many of you probably know that I've criticized the People's Parties a lot in recent years, and I did it today. I stopped that in the media. You know why? Because the alternative is much worse. So for now, I'm happy that we still have a serious, solid government, not going into extremism on the right. And that brings me to something we should pay much more attention to, and which affects so many problems at the same time. Wars, the climate crisis, and you name it, that's disinformation. We need to fight disinformation, in particular in the social media. The EU is doing a bit about it, but still very weak and still very hesitant. Without fighting disinformation, in particular on TikTok and platforms like that, we won't solve any of these problems in a serious way.
That's very interesting, because also that's an under-discussed aspect of it. And before I open up the floor for audience question, just in one word, we've heard a lot in the past hour about long-term goals, short-term goals, a bunch of different alternatives. In one word, what would you say is the thing that the fight against climate change in your personal, professional capacity need right now? What does the fight absolutely? What is the most important thing? If you could do one thing right now, what would you do at this moment? And maybe let's start again here with Professor Komkolb.
Well, I think that's one of the problems, that you think you can answer with one word. And that's our time. Everybody wants short answers and simple answers.
I have one word, honesty. That would bring us a long way.
Yeah, transparency would be another one. But none of these, I could also say diplomacy, not one of these words will solve the problem. We need a combination of many things. And yeah, I think I'm so often asked, what are the three most important things? I don't think it works that way. It's systemic.
Okay. For you?
Well, I think, as I said, a big role is politics and diplomacy to promote I talk about the energy sector, to promote and to address renewable green energy, and that people are voting for these projects.
Getting votes. And lastly, you, Mr. Rosenmeier, what do you think is like the one thing?
I'll try in one sentence, not
Okay.
in one word. Bring all those great innovation projects on the road and remove the hurdles, be it regulatory, be it financial. If you said a wish, right? So if we had all the money, bring all those great innovative projects that can reduce CO2 and other emissions on the road.
Okay. Then I would thank you all for being extremely interesting in all of your answers and relevant to the most pressing issues of our time. I'm very much in the #1 issue camp. And I would open up the floor to audience questions. Yes, maybe here and then over there. Yeah, the microphone is coming.
Hi, good morning. My name is Philipp with the UN Office for Disarmament Affairs. So naturally, from my background, I might pick up on what you said, that peace, sustainability, climate change, it all goes hand in hand. One of the things I work on is educational resources, and we're actually trying to work more with educators to make sure that they have the tools necessary to discuss these issues. So what are some of the resources, the tools that you might find helpful in the classroom to talk to students, to bring this issue of disarmament and conflict and the impact of weapons and the military industry on climate into the classroom? What can we do to help that? And then if you'll allow me, a question for the broader panel, because you said disinformation. Again, from this educational perspective, what are some of the things that we can do to counter this disinformation, misinformation online? How can we connect peace and disarmament and weapons issues, military industry, to climate and to environmental affairs? Thank you.
Maybe let's collect the questions. I saw one over there, I think. Yeah.
Hello, thank you so much. I'm American and I'm living in Germany right now. And I think in many ways Europe is more green than America. Just like anecdotally, we're sorting our trash a lot more. Gas is like a lot more expensive here. But something that I'm wondering about is nuclear power. And like especially as Germany and Europe relies a lot on these pipelines that are coming from Russia, and this is becoming a political issue. But also at the same time, like I'm watching a lot of nuclear power plants close. And so I'm wondering kind of like why is this like a European stance that nuclear power is not the answer to like ameliorating some of the issues with climate change? That's it.
Yeah, let's collect the third question and then we'll give it to the panel.
My name is Valentin. I am one of the new UNFCCC youth representatives for Austria. My question is, how can you safeguard forward-looking EU legislation? We've seen that the CSDDD has been changed over the time, and also the carbon border adjustment method is also being changed at the moment. How can you safeguard future-oriented EU legislation?
Okay, I think we'll start from the top. Maybe you will start with the resources and the classroom. Sort of bringing it.
You know, I really think that we need to start with educating the teachers. It is not simple to talk about peace in classrooms. I did it last night in one of my seminars, and the students are, I mean, the students that come to my classes are already a selection of predisposed towards climate and other issues of general welfare. And yet, talking about peace is very difficult because the whole mainstream thinking is in another direction. And if you look at all the media, if you look at all the politicians, it all goes in the same direction. We need to strengthen security. You might call it defensive, but well, we know the difficulties in that. So I think what we really need is public discussion about these things. A student recently came to me after another lecture and said, I'm so glad you talked about this, because when I talk about peace in my group of friends, I'm immediately an outsider. And outsider is even a friendly term for it. So I think we really need to work on a change in the way society discusses these things. It's not discussed. In Austria, I'm pretty sure it's the same in Germany, and if I look at the European Union, it's the same. And the representative of the European Union, just in the first panel, said the two main issues are competitiveness and security. I mean, competitiveness is a different word for growth, economic growth, and we all know that we cannot have this growth in connection with limited resources. And security is another word for armament. So I really think we need, and this goes into the fake news part, I think we need to build up trust in our politicians, trust in our media. They have to change in order to be able to gain trust. But I think that's part of what we really need. I don't know how to achieve it, except strengthening those who are already working towards it. By the way, there's a peace demonstration this afternoon in Vienna, just for anybody who's interested in peace, at 4 o'clock, which unfortunately overlaps with you.
Maybe on the disinformation part, Professor Steuer, maybe you have something to say of how to counter these online things.
I'd also talk more about peace, but it's very hard if you have a dictator forcing war on a European country very close to us. That's something we need to take into account when we talk about that. About the other things, how to fight disinformation, you can't do it without regulation. You need a strong regulatory framework. The EU needs to do more. It has to enforce the rules it has already in place, which doesn't happen really, or which happens in a way that doesn't really hurt those big tech companies. So there needs to be a lot more, and the EU might get under pressure by the US if it did, but it's worth trying because there's really a lot at stake. About nuclear power, it's an economic question. It's solved already. It's too expensive. It can't compete with renewable energies, except for some countries still build on it, but they have to put a lot of tax money into those plants because it's no longer really competitive.
Besides, it's too slow.
And too slow. It takes 20 years to build it.
Mr. Roman, yes?
Yeah, just one sentence to the nuclear power. Europe is a fan of nuclear power. We can say that from last year that the European Commission said or decided that nuclear power is a green and renewable power. France and also United Kingdom, they are huge producers with nuclear power. I just can say that Austria is not maybe thanks. It's not that big fan of nuclear power. I think also these both parties, the two professors, they had a personal history with fighting against the nuclear power in Austria. And yes, as in the first question round, we talked about the costs of certain things and also the costs of nuclear power. We don't mention the cost of nuclear power after the production process. So it's a huge cost factor after the production of nuclear.
Mm-hmm. And maybe to the UNFCCC youth delegates, in your experience sort of working in the EU regulatory framework and also especially with new sort of postponed or changed legislation, do you see that as sort of also a mechanism to safeguard the legislation as is instead of not having any, or do you think there needs to be a mechanism that is like once something is decided, we actually can go through with it?
Well, if that was to me the question. I mean, for the changes recently made, indeed, for the carbon border adjustment mechanism and also the corporate sustainability reporting directive, also the famous supply chain law, there were also amendments proposed. I have to add, I have to say, the goals themselves haven't changed, but what the legislators heard, so the goals in terms of 2050 climate neutrality, for example, or minus 55% greenhouse gas emissions by 2030. So the goals didn't change. The amendments aim at how we get there. The thing is, for example, for sustainability reporting, it was even the banks, those that should give loans out to the companies that want to invest in more innovative solutions or more cleaner solutions. The banks themselves told the legislators, and also within the chamber and also within the Austrian policy process, that they get a lot of information from the companies that is not relevant for their assessment whether this investment for them is sustainable or not. So why not? And so that's where this proposal of why don't we reduce the data points, the thousands of data points, to a few hundred that are actually relevant for the one financing the innovation project. So that's one thing. In terms of the CBAM, I think what they did was quite good because they realized 90% of the imported emissions, it's about the imported emissions, right? Are actually only caused by 10% of the importers. So why not focus on these 10% and leave out the other 90% that do less than 9% of the emissions? I actually think also internationally that could be a that's not again my personal opinion, a nice approach to say, okay, what are the companies and which sectors are actually emitting more, and why not concentrate on those instead of forcing it on, I don't know, the carpenter that makes the chair, for example, whether he has to provide 1,000 data points or not. Apparently for the bank, it's irrelevant. That's what they're saying. So those are the changes that were included, but the goal themselves didn't change. The goal itself does not change. So just as a way of that, and also, I mean, we have heard it. Luckily, thankfully, we live in a democracy. It's the best process that we have come up so far, thank God. So laws can also be changed. That's just what I wanted to say here. In terms of nuclear, for example, I mean, the WIKO doesn't have a position. I just wanted to say it also has become a geopolitical issue because just 2 days ago there was another roadmap, another strategy issued by the Commission on, it's called Repower EU roadmap, but it's actually about getting rid of Russian gas and also Russian uranium. So there's also this geopolitical. At the beginning, it was a security issue for many countries, but actually it's getting into this geopolitical sphere because some of the Central and Eastern European member states get a lot of their uranium still from Russia. So just to that. But as the chamber itself, we don't have a position on nuclear as it is.
And that is probably also an interesting thing to think about and to carry with you into the break. We have done what I would call a Punktlandung. We could talk about this topic for hours, and I wish we could, but we just don't have the time. I would like to personally thank all of you for this interesting panel and for the vivid discussions as well. And let's give them all a bigger round of applause. Thank you so much.